Hey everybody, welcome to Goshen Prepping. Thanks for being here. We need to talk about power and electricity. And I know people talk about, you know what, people live thousands of years on electricity. We can do it again. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case, especially if we talk about loss of the power grid. It's estimated 90% of the people of this country, the United States alone, are going to die because people panic in these situations. But obviously we're not at that catastrophic day yet, but we are certainly heading for time. Stick to this video because I'm going to show you some ways we can try to remedy this, but we have some problems coming. Check this out. From the U.S. News and World Report, 2/3 of North America could face power shortages this winter. Lose power in the summer, you're going to lose your fan and air conditioning, you're going to hate life, but lose power in the winter obviously could be fatal. More than half of the U.S. and parts of Canada, home to around 180 million people, could fall short of electricity during extreme cold weather this winter due to, well, practically speaking, natural gas. And because of that, from the Institute for Energy Research, they put out key takeaways. They're saying we could have electricity shortfalls this winter due to an increasing fragility of the dependable energy sources and lack of pipeline infrastructure. This finding by the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation is the latest warning that the Biden administration's whole of government approach to energy transition is, listen to this, erasing safety margins necessary to ensure adequate supply of energy for Americans. And don't you love independent corporations when they put out news telling you the truth about these things? I'm all about green energy, by the way. I love solar. I'll be honest, I wouldn't like having a wind turbine in my backyard, but trying to go green, I'm all for this. But cutting off all of our supply of electricity for an incredibly electricity-hungry country and shifting us into this green before we're ready, that's a big problem because it's not simply about having your car and driving around places, not simply about going to the movies or your favorite restaurant. It's talking about having heat and surviving in the winter. And furthermore, EPA's emissions regulating proposals, according to a recent analysis that found that forced retirement of coal and gas plants jeopardize the electric grid when there simply isn't enough power coming from wind and solar. Well said, and therefore we very well may have lack of electricity, lack of power in certain parts of the country right in the middle of winter when we need it the most. So last article before we get to some actual tangible things you can do. Do we face electricity shortages this winter? Here is an assessment. And instead of going through a whole bunch of parts of the country that we have to deal with this, even though it's there, and I'll link this below, by the way, if you want to read this through yourself, this statement says it all. A large portion of North America's bulk power system is at risk of insufficient electricity supplies during peak winter conditions. And there you have it. Are you prepared to not have electricity this winter? We're not simply talking about not having electricity for your favorite movie theater, etc. We're talking about true things you need for your home. And when we talk about preparedness and prepping, there are two things we're looking at. Number one, we're looking at heat for you, obviously, keeping warm. Because understand that if you lose electricity, even if you have propane or natural gas and you have a furnace, that furnace is not going. It's not blowing the hot air. Obviously, it can't even turn on either because you don't want to have the fire stoking up in there and no blowing going through. It's a safety mechanism, so you're not going to have your furnace working. So I always talk about the remedy for this, obviously, is having some kind of alternate heating source. Having a buddy heater, having a kerosene heater, that's what we have in our house. I mean, in reality, in our house, we have a wood stove. But we've always depended on kerosene to be able to heat a room or just be able to keep warm in emergency situations. What do you have for those kind of things? Now, I will link a couple below in case you want to look at possibly picking them up. I would highly recommend you have something as an alternate heat source. Now, the same thing with that goes, you could try to section off a room. A lot of emergency parts of the government will tell you to like put blankets up on doorways. I say that you should get a tent. This works really well, by the way, especially during the cold nights when this happens. Have a tent, like put it in your living room, or even put that tent on the mattress of your bed if it's just you and maybe one other person. Go ahead and go in the tent. Have your sleeping bags, and that tent, because your body releases heat, it gets trapped in there, kind of like a little envelope, and will increase your warmth. A lot of people think that a tent keeps you warm or a sleeping bag keeps you warm. It doesn't. It doesn't keep you warm. Your body heat keeps you warm. But what happens is when you have the insulation between your sleeping bag or the tent, it doesn't allow your body heat to be released out into the atmosphere as easy, retaining the heat in that area, and you stay warmer. So having an emergency tent for that situation is good. I mean, I always talk about you want to have a bug out bag anyway, Who knows if there's going to be happening something in your area, a train wreck or wildfire you want to bug out, and having a tent and sleeping bag obviously is advantageous, but you can still use it in your home as well. So be able to keep warm obviously is the number one thing we're looking at when it comes to obviously not having enough electricity this winter. And the second thing we're going to look at is the electricity itself. And obviously I'm not talking about being dependent on always having lights. You can have a candle or a flashlight that works well. That's not what I'm saying. But when we talk about electricity, one of the things that modern nations, first world nations, do depend on is refrigeration and your freezer. If you're like me, I have a fridge with a freezer on top, and I also have a chest freezer. And to be able to keep those things nice and cold and frozen, especially for extended periods of time, if your power goes out for a few hours, they're going to be fine. But if we're talking about for a few days, you can literally lose all of those preps, all that meat you have frozen, all those things you spent that money on very quickly. So having something, some kind of electricity device to be able to keep your freezer going at least, even if it's not your fridge, is something you want to shoot for. Having a solar generator works well. We have a 4 Patriots that works well. We have a BLUETTI that does that for us and keeps my chest freezer going when we have no power. I'll link those below as well. But I would recommend you have something at least on the larger size to be able to do that. It doesn't take as much power as you think because the compressor for your freezer doesn't run 24/7. It only runs occasionally just to be able to make it colder. Then as the temperature slowly over a few hours raises up again, the compressor will turn on again and bring it down. And obviously having a efficient freezer works well too. If you have a really old one, I was almost saying old one, sometimes the old ones work better than new ones, but having a very efficient freezer works. Now you could also have obviously a gas generator or a propane generator doing the same thing, but we do have to worry about if we're talking about long term, there's only so much gas and propane you may store. Whereas if you have some kind of solar generator, hopefully the sun's not going to be blocked out, but the sun will be able to keep your solar generator going. So definitely food for thought, especially when we look at electricity shortages happening this winter. But here's what I really want you to listen to this. And here's probably the most important thing. This is not going away. This is literally just the beginning of having energy shortages because we have more and more Americans, more and more technology, more and more electric cars, more and more problems as the government is cutting out more and more coal, cutting out more and more power, and trying to literally stifle us into a situation where we don't have enough electricity. You think we're going to have shortages this winter? That's nothing compared to what's coming. And being prepared for this, obviously, is what you want to shoot for. So now's the time to see if you can install a wood stove to keep you warm. Now's the time to try to get some kind of solar generator system to be able to give your power for your freezer as time comes. Because as time is coming, it's going to get more and more difficult. Thanks for watching.